this is the technique that we have cobbled together from multiple different experts to create what we call the Curious Protocol. And it is the technique that we use on a consistent basis to move us through conflict, back to deep connection, and back to fun. And I think that's so important because without touching each of these steps, something typically gets missed. Something gets brushed over, something gets pushed down, something gets avoided, something endures and lasts too long. This is the best thing that I've found to help you when you're in conflict to move through that. So if you have the workbook that we sent out via email, I would go ahead and pull that up now and just kind of have it sitting on the side view panel there, because we'll be touching on it throughout the call today. A big part of what we're going to talk about today and cover is based upon Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. If you haven't read that book, it's a short read and it's a classic, absolute must read. One of the biggest takeaways for me in that book is what he calls the gap. And the gap is, it's up to you how short of a period of time it is, but it is possibly the most powerful thing that you can grasp. If you can understand that for all the rest of your life, situations will be happening in every single present moment, and each of those situations represents stimulus. And between the stimulus and your response to it is a gap. Sometimes that gap is what we call a short fuse, snap of the fingers. Sometimes you can stretch it into a couple days, whatever it is. It doesn't really matter the amount of time between the stimulus and the response. The point is, what do you do with that powerful moment? When you choose to be conscious instead of to go into autopilot, that is when your life begins to change. And so the hardest part about this is most of us run on autopilot most of the time. We don't think that we do, but it's because our brain is constantly trying to conserve resources. It will, at any moment possible, if there's a way to just not think but go into autopilot, it conserves so much. Do you know that the calories burned in the athletes in a chess tournament are often more than actually somebody going and doing a workout in the gym? Like when your brain actually thinks, it consumes so many calories. And this is why, through part of our evolution or whatever you want to call it, as we've developed and adapted over the years, over the centuries, we have learned how to not think. And you would think, well, that's dumb. It's actually really, really smart. The problem is at some point it starts to go wrong. And so with that, we have learned to go to autopilot so that we can conserve resources. The problem is autopilot isn't always the right answer. And so that's what we're going to talk about today is what do we do when we unplug the autopilot and actually plug into how to address these issues. Megan, I want to turn it over to you for a minute and see if there's anything that you want to add before we jump into the workbook and into this protocol.
Not really. Besides that, I'm excited to learn and hear about how you're teaching it from this perspective. I think the context of Frankel, having that context and just what he talked about was because he was trying to survive, right? He was trying to survive the camp and not necessarily talking about it from the perspective of relationship, but like just that whole concept, how we can apply it in relationships. I think it's great and it's awesome for us to use. So
yeah. And to give a little spoiler to the book, Viktor Frankl was a psychotherapist who ended up in a Nazi concentration camp, survived the camp, and most of the story is him relaying his observations of who survived and who didn't in the camps. And so as you can imagine, in the camp like that, in a concentration death camp like that, there is all kinds of stimulus. And the people who chose to mind that gap are the people who frequently were able to survive And so it's an amazing book, and I think you'll all really get something from it. On page 3 of the workbook here, there are questions. If you guys are familiar with our workbooks, frequently we don't cover the questions in these calls because the content is kind of heavy and we give the workbook to you guys to work out afterwards. But these are questions for you to sit with and ponder and go, where is my opportunity in this message? So I highly encourage you, whether you print this off, there's a black and white version that we send, so that makes printing easy, or whether you save it and make it an editable PDF and do that, or just print it and put it with a journal and write whatever you want. This is something that I do highly recommend. Spend some time on and really see what comes out of you as you're going through this. Okay. So curious. Curious is a method that we developed, and we turned it into an acronym so that if you spend some time, you can actually remember in the moment how to go through this protocol to create the deep connection that you want in the midst of conflict. That being said, when we talk about curious, one of the biggest things is, can we choose to not be on autopilot? I'm going to take it back a step. Most of us don't even recognize when we go into flight, fight, or freeze modes. But what's important about that is your brain is made up of many, many different little areas that do lots of different things. But one of the oldest parts of your brain is called the amygdala. And the amygdala is a small thing right in the center of the brain, and it controls your survival. You're basically predisposed to one or two of the 3 different responses: fight, flight, or freeze. Okay. You almost can't really help that. Whatever your normal thing is, if you're a fighter, if you're a flighter, or if you're a freezer, it's really difficult to change that. It is built into your wiring. Now, that being said, through things like release work, you can shift and release the idea that when some stimulus happens, it equals a threat, an existential threat, and I need to go into survival mode. And this is what creates the opportunity for you to say, "Ooh, wait a second. I'm going to pause what I normally do, and I have the choice now to behave in a different way." It removes the release work that Mayan does with you, removes that survival threat, and now brings your thoughts into your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain that actually solves problems, actually thinks, actually gets into like puzzles and different things. It's the one that can do the work to move through things instead of just trying to survive. So this is why release work comes first and then the skills afterwards. Does that make sense?
There's something that you said that sparked something silly that I'm gonna share. You said something about mind the gap. I don't know if you remember a while back, what was the saying where it was like something and carry on? Remember the whole like
Keep calm and carry
keep
on.
calm, carry yeah. But so if you've ever been to England or, there's a common thing where they say mind the gap, right? Like if you're getting on the train, there's a giant gap. So they're like, mind the gap, mind the gap. So when you said that, that actually just immediately triggered within me, like, mind the gap, like in the British accent that I can't do. So that might be a good like reminder, like anchor, like, okay, whenever I get into, some kind of conflict, mind the gap. Like that way it will remind you to, okay, there is a gap here. Let's stay there for a little bit so that I can take a look at what's there. That's my contribution.
I think that's great. I did use that term intentionally. And I think that everybody else here wants to hear you do some other imitations. So can you do your chicken imitation for everyone?
Now we're going off way tangent. Angus likes it when I do animal noises that I can do. So yesterday I was showing off that I could do, what was it like? Oh no, that's a good one. I was doing like cock-a-doodle-doo. I don't, yeah, that's a rooster in case you didn't know.
I don't think Mayan grew up around any animals. And
I did
so
not.
she like completely lacks the ability to imitate their sounds. And it cracks me up since I grew up on a ranch and basically around more animals than I can even remember to name at any given time. So it cracks me up anytime she does that. So that was a little freebie there, and we'll get back to the conversation. But yes, mind the gap. Absolutely. Okay. So curious. As I mentioned, it is an acronym for the technique that we're talking about. So the first step is letter C. That first C stands for calm. Okay. The most important thing that we can do right after minding the gap is to remain calm, right? When we've done the release work, and sometimes we need to do release work on ourselves before we can actually engage the conversation with our partner and go, ooh, I'm like really lit up right now. How do I manage myself so that I can orchestrate this conversation? And so I'm actually just going to blow this up. I know that you guys can, when I say blow it up, I'm blowing it up on my end so I can read it along with you. But so this is one of the most important steps, and it's usually the one that's skipped the most. But you cannot run this protocol when you're flooded. When we talk about flooded, that is the technical term for emotional flooding. It's when your brain's neurochemistry is flooded with all kinds of hormones and stuff like that. And when that happens, that typically means your amygdala is running things. It typically means you're not going to be able to solve things. So the question to ask yourself honestly each time is, am I regulated enough to be genuinely curious about what's happening here? Sometimes it's a good idea to have your own phrase, like pause phrase, that you know that you can turn to and just say, you know what? I need a minute, please. And if you have something that you can say and kind of pin that in the conversation that your partner knows you're doing some work, you're going to regulate yourself, you'll come back in a minute. I was in a relationship once where when I was trying to regulate myself, the woman I was in a relationship with would literally chase me around the house, like trying to get answers, trying to solve problems. But it was like, I could not regulate myself enough to actually have the conversation with her. And even when I was trying to regulate it, she wouldn't let me do that. It would just keep escalating. And no wonder we got divorced, right? Like there was no way for us to do it. We didn't have the techniques and tools that I have now. And so it just kept getting worse and worse. And the Gottmans talk about, man, maybe you'll remember the percentage. For some reason, I'm forgetting right now, but it's a significant amount of conflicts. It's like 90 something percent or something like that. Wherever a conversation starts, it almost never de-escalates. It always escalates from there. So that's what the natural world situation is. That's their observations of most couples. Wherever the starting point is where the floor is of that escalate of that conflict, and it just keeps ratcheting it up from there. If you can start the conversation lower because you regulate yourself, now all of a sudden you may not trigger their fight or flight or freeze. You create the opportunity for it to be a discussion. Now you can actually solve the problems instead of just getting into that one-upmanship, the escalation. Does that make sense? Man, am I missing anything that you can think of regarding this?
No, I think you might be referring to 69% of relationship conflicts are not solvable. Like you just keep having recurring con that's the only
That's a
percentage that I
different
can
one.
think
I'm
of,
not
but
talking about that, but
yeah, I don't know
no,
about
there's something else, but I can't remember what it is, but it's not super critical. Just know that whatever the floor is of that conversation, whenever the conflict starts, frequently it's difficult to go down. So if you can regulate first and bring it down a notch, that creates the opportunity to have a more productive conversation. Does that make sense, everybody? Cool.
I did find the stat real quick. Mhm.
Okay. What's
So,
up?
yeah, they were talking about what they call harsh startup, right? So if you start a conversation or an argument a certain way, for example, if you criticize, if you use contempt, sarcasm, something like that, they can actually predict with a 96% accuracy how it's going to go. So just doesn't mean that you can't resolve it, but it predicts kind of the trajectory of that conversation. So
Yep.
if you can soften how you start the conversation, it will end up resolving better.
Yeah. Thank you. I knew it was somewhere in the 90% range, but thank you very much. because I had forgotten the term for it. But okay, you understand. Seek to understand before you seek to be understood. This is one of the hardest things because we all want to be understood. In fact, we frequently think that if you understood me, you wouldn't have acted that way. So I need to tell you about me, about what you did, so that I can feel understood. But by doing that, it typically creates a defensiveness, or it creates a stonewalling, or it creates a feeling of contempt that you're relaying to the other person or something like that. So if we can pause that, and you guys have probably heard us talk about the parking matrix that we've developed. This is when we run across one of those conflicts that just comes up over and over and over again. This is one of the main things that we use to get to the bottom of it. So when I'm in the parking lot and I'm ready to drive home and literally swear off never driving me in the car again, like literally in my head go, fuck it. I'm never driving your car again. It's not worth it. I'm done with this. Once I dealt with myself, regulated myself, that's when I realized like, I have no idea how she thinks about this situation. Maybe I need to understand how she decides where it's okay to park her car. And so that's when I created the parking matrix. So I'm like, hey, we have to figure out this is how I decide where I'm going to park. I have no idea how you decide where you're going to park. Let's write these things out so that we can see and maybe understand each other. After that, we were actually able to get to some things and resolve that. And I don't think we've had that issue ever since. Like we dealt with it once. And now I don't even remember the last time you really criticized where I parked or anything like that. You'll sometimes question like, ooh, is this the best spot? Could we park in that one over there? And it's like, oh yeah, that's fine. Like last night we went to BJ's for our State of the Love Union date night, and there was a spot that was open. She's like, you can park there. And I'm like, yeah, but I know you like more space between the cars. So I'm going to park over there on the other side. And, the doors can open fully and completely. I know that makes you feel better. So I'm going to park there instead. I actually chose that consciously because I remembered us doing that parking matrix. And that was one of the things that was important to her, is not having cars around that are going to bang her car. So when I sought to understand her more than to be understood, that actually helped me. And it's very much like you guys hear us talk about with feminine communication, with the story about not making the bed. Once I knew what was actually underneath, hey, when you don't make the bed, it makes me feel like there's no peace in this house. It makes me feel stressed or anxious. Oh, now I understand you. Before it just sounded like you were just like making me do something that I didn't want to do. Once I understand you, now I can actually make a conscious decision that helps support our relationship. I think understand is pretty self-explanatory, so I'm not going to spend too much time here. I'll open it up for questions in a minute, but let's go on to rapport. And actually, man, I actually want you, if you don't mind, talk about rapport a little bit, because I know you're kind of an expert at this, and I think it'll be beneficial. How do you help make sure that we have rapport when we're in these types of discussions?
So rapport as a basic communication tool, right? Before you have conversations with anybody, before you, whether it's with your kids, whether it's working with clients, with your coworkers, we never assume that we have rapport just because we've had a close relationship up until now, right? There could be something that has happened that maybe they're not truly present, or maybe something happened in between you guys and you don't know about it, and there's something there that's in the way, right? So having rapport and creating rapport and building rapport is important before, especially going into a deep conversation or resolving conflict or something like that, right? And so rapport, like you kind of know when you have rapport with somebody, you like kind of have that feeling of like, oh, we're like a kindred spirit, or oh my gosh, like, yeah, yeah. There's a lot of like this agreement feeling, right? When you catch up with a friend and you just have that feeling with somebody. So it could be a friend, it could be an acquaintance, it could be a family member, like I said, but it's that like taking a few minutes to catching up with one another, to like asking them questions and just creating conversation where they feel like you're present with them, right? And so there's a few different things you can do. in the workbook, it says matching and mirroring. So, for example, it's a very subtle thing. You can match their body language. You can match the way that they speak, right? You can match if they speak a little bit faster, if you match that speed of their words. Now you're in rapport with them. Now you're in like what's another word besides rapport? I don't want to keep using the same word.
You're
But
almost aligned,
yeah, yeah, like you're similar
like
with them, right?
energetically aligned or something like that.
Yeah, like we like people who are like us, right? So that's what we're creating is a situation where you feel similar, you feel familiar, you feel like you're part of the same thing, right? So matching is one way where you can match their body language. If they have their arms crossed, right, you can cross your arms too, but very subtly. You're not trying to like mimic them obviously, right? It's just very subtle. So that's mimicking is not what we're talking about, but really matching and mirroring. Mirroring is like if I were to raise my hand, and then Angus, if you were to raise your hand, like I'm raising my right hand, he's
I would
raising
raise my
his
left.
left hand, and it looks like there's a mirror and we're reflecting back and forth, right? Versus if we're matching, then if we're both raising the right hand, then we're doing the same thing. Right? So those are some simple, subtle ways that you can use, whether it's with a work environment or with relationships, to create that rapport.
And I'll say this, there are courses that you can take. I'm sure you can find some videos on YouTube that talk about matching and mirroring and rapport. It's one of the easiest skills to learn. And especially if you have any like work dynamics or you go to networking events or something like that, if you can learn the skills of matching and mirroring and other rapport building things, you'll end up at those events with more connections and more people who just like you. Because as Mayan said, and this is a psychological truth, we like people who are like us. So if you can help them feel like you are like them, they're going to like you more. And then they're going to be more open to working with you, collaborating with you, sharing ideas with you, business collaborations, whatever it is. There's a lot of opportunities. So it's a valuable skill. We're not going to cover much more of it here. In fact, we're not going to cover any more of it here, but you can go out and learn more of that. It is something that we highly recommend. It definitely helps in a lot of those areas, including these types of conversations where you want to make sure that your partner feels that you are connected to them, that you're trying to be in this with them. You're not over them. You're not better than them. You're not higher than that. You're coming to it from their same level, their same kind of energy. You're in it with them. Okay. All right. So the first question I'm going to ask is, looking at these first three steps, I want to open it up and you're welcome to come off mute or type it in the chat. Of these first three steps, which one do you think is the hardest one for you to access in conflict? The problem happens, the problem arises. Which one do you think, ooh, I'm really going to struggle with being calm? I'm really going to struggle with seeking to understand before being understood. I'm going to struggle to build rapport. Look at your past, look at your previous relationship dynamics, and let's talk about which one is probably going to be the biggest trip up for you.
Says understand.
Okay, gotcha. Do you want to expound on that at all? What
I
happens for you?
Yeah, I think like what you were saying, I wanna be understood first. And so as much as I want to understand them, sometimes I'm just like, "No, I'm right and you're wrong." And I'm like, "No, it's not okay. I know that's not okay," but it's like ingrained in me. I'm right, you're wrong. So to not understand for it makes so much sense is like once you can get to that level and then not being above somebody or below somebody, it's finding that commonality. But when you don't feel like you're understood, the first thing you want to be is understood. That was really good, and I didn't even so, thank you for that.
Yeah,
The
good.
awareness is huge for me.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Anybody else want to share anything? What's the word I'm looking for? There is a problem sometimes with validating, because somebody can feel a certain way and you can validate that they feel a certain way. And at the same time, it may not be justified, right? Like, have you ever seen somebody start road raging? And it's like, oh, I see, I validate your anger, I validate that. And yet I can't condone the way that you're justifying it. Like, I saw the person cut you off. It didn't trigger me. It triggered you. I see that you're feeling that way, but you don't have to. So this is where sometimes I used to get hung up, is that in the act of validating, I felt like I was condoning. And those two things don't have to be the same. So when you're at this stage of the curious protocol, you're literally just identifying what you may have contributed that caused them to feel a certain way. This doesn't mean that you have to take the blame.
There's a
This,
phrase that might
like,
help. To me, if I say I can see how, right? I can see how that might make you feel that way. I can see how, then it puts me in their shoes, but I'm not necessarily like that's not necessarily how I would react, but I can see how this chain of events would lead you to think this way, feel this way, behave this way, right? So I think that those words might support in helping you step into someone else's shoes without condoning them, without being like, oh, yeah, you're 100% right, because it's just their reaction, right?
yeah, absolutely. And that language is in here in the workbook. I can see how when I specific behavior, even though I didn't intend it that way, could have made you feel that way. This is the example. And I think this was the differential part of the conversation when Maine and I had the whole slamming door conflict that happened over and over and over again until on roughly the fifth time, I stopped defending myself. I stopped saying, I didn't slam the door. I started saying, I can see how when the door slammed, when that loud noise happened, it made you feel this way. It wasn't my intent. I didn't do it on purpose, but I can see how me letting that happen caused this in you. And once that happened, we stopped with the headbutting and we could actually go into the next two things. So the next one, the letter O, is offer. Match the offer to what they actually need. We talked about this just the other day. May, in our release call, you were talking about how sometimes you'll show up as angry, but if you don't go down underneath anger to figure out what the specific thing was, your example the other day was dismissed. If I'm making an offer, apologizing for making you angry, but what you were really feeling was dismissed, my offer is going to miss. So I need to have gotten the understanding first, identified my part, and then make my offer of an apology, an amends, a shift in behavior, whatever it is that actually solves or addresses the feeling that they're having. Because if I don't, the conflict will continue to go on because I'm offering one level of resolution, but the problem is not at that level. It's somewhere down here. We're still missing each other. We're still not going to feel that resolution. All right. So I'll reiterate one thing in that third box there. Acknowledging the impact is very different than taking blame. So acknowledging impact sounds something like, I'm sorry that that landed that way. That was not my intention. Taking blame is, I'm sorry, you're right. Everything's my fault. The first one has the opportunity to build connection. The second one typically builds resentment and mistrust in both of you. So try to really stay with what your intention is, not justifying it, but just acknowledging that you had that impact.
Can I
Good.
add something about, so if there was something that you did that genuinely, like you need to ask for forgiveness for, saying, can't remember if we taught this before, but there's a difference between saying, I'm sorry and please forgive me,
Good point. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
right? Like when you say, I'm sorry, it's, how do I describe it? It's almost like, it's like you're giving somebody something and you're just putting it there of like, "Hey, I'm sorry," and then you're walking away, right? There's no asking of, "Did you receive it?" Like, what's your response to it? Versus if you said to somebody, "Please forgive me," now it's almost like I'm handing you something, and now it's like in your court, okay, you're receiving my asking for forgiveness, and then you can kind of give it back or you can respond to it, right? So it's a different energy when you say, I'm sorry versus please forgive me. And one is one sided, whereas please forgive me is more interactive type of. apology, I guess. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
Beautiful. It is. When there's conflict, there's already been an exchange. So to just say, I'm sorry, is to just give something one way. And it works best if we can create another exchange where we reconnect things. So I think that's a great point, man. Thanks for bringing that up. Okay. The second U in the Curious Protocol is the uncover or underneath step. Before you attempt this step, in fact, this is probably the most dangerous step. And if you skip any of the previous steps or don't do them well, do not attempt this step. It will typically backfire and make things worse. And also, this step isn't necessary in every conflict. This is the step that is typically necessary when we've had the same conversation 3, 4, 5+ times, and we haven't figured out that there's that we haven't gotten to resolution yet. This can be why. And so the question that we typically ask here is something like, we've already made the amends, we've already done all that kind of stuff. Hey, I'm just curious. Does this feeling remind you of anything from your past? Like a specific memory or time that you felt something similar? Now, you guys who've been through release work have heard Mayan ask you this question many times. Like, when was the first time that you felt this way? And it's important to stop talking, wait, be patient, because the answer to this question is most likely the root of the repeating conflict in our life. And it almost always has nothing to do with you. These are the landmines that we talk about. You were just happily traipsing through life, doing your thing, let the door slam, boom, explosion. What the heck? Where did this come from? The landmine is down there. It was planted long before you. Has almost nothing to do with you. You just triggered it. This is why we ask this question. What did it remind you of when I did it? What did it feel like? And when's the first time you felt that way? This is, if you can create the safety in your relationship to get a straight answer on this, this is what will create such deeper connection. It will create the healing opportunities in your partner. This is you being an excellent partner, creating the opportunity for them to up spiral. Because when they let go of some of that stuff and it feels safe for them to now pull out and look at where it's been pushed down and hidden and covered up like that landmine for years, now's the time where we've created safety to look at it, heal it, let it go, and then potentially move on. All right. Finally, and this is maybe my favorite one because I used to be terrible at it. In fact, I remember learning when I was little, listening to like all the people that were older than me and smarter than me and relationship experts talking about men not being sensitive and not like really emotionally connecting to their partners. And I took that very seriously. And so when I would create conflict accidentally in my previous relationships, when I would feel what she was feeling and I would try to like be in it with her, I wouldn't try to dismiss it or anything like that. And unintentionally, what I didn't know was I was doing two things. One, I was anchoring her to that feeling. Anchoring is something else that we're not going to talk much about, but when you are in elevated emotional states, physical touch or eye contact can anchor somebody to that feeling. So I would typically try to like console my wife, my ex-wife, when she was in this elevated state. And over the course of time, my physical touch to her began to be repulsive because when I would touch her, just like rub her back or her shoulder, it would physically remind her of the things that I'd done wrong in the past. I thought I was consoling her. I thought I was being in it with her and being emotionally sensitive. And what I was really doing was anchoring that feeling and that emotion to my touch, making it to where my touch over the course of years actually was repulsive to her. So that's the first thing that we need to be aware of. The second thing is I would allow that state to hang. And so we would just stay in this, like the conflict was kind of over, but I had to let her know that I was serious and I meant what I said and I was intentional and I was earnest. And so I would stay in this like grieving, sad, shameful state for hours, if not days, if not weeks, depending upon the conflict that we had. So even though we may have gotten to somewhat of a resolution, we stayed in the heaviness of the moment. And that also can be a killer for your relationship. So in the final step of the Curious Protocol, solution and the shift. So we get to co-create this. And this is also a tricky area because if you come in with humor too early or something like that, all of a sudden you can actually undo some of the work that you've already done. So only after all the previous steps are genuinely complete, offer thoughtful solutions. This is like trying to pull out the nail too early. Now we're actually at the point where it's like, oh, yeah, maybe I should pull out the nail. Offer thoughtful solutions and behavior modifications going forward. Make sure that they're thoughtful. One of the things I used to do was make a big promise and not count the cost of what it would take to make that happen in the future. So then I was just setting myself up for a future conflict because I made a promise that I couldn't fulfill 3-4 months in the future or whatever it might be. Now I'm disappointed in you again because you said you were going to do this and you failed at it. So if you're going to make some sort of behavioral modification, think through what you're promising. Can you actually do that? And do you need to have a conversation around, I'm going to need some grace. I'm going to try this, but I'm probably going to fail and fall on my face 3, 4, 5, 6 times. Please don't criticize me too harsh as I'm learning this new skill. Get that agreement. Remind each other that you're on the same team and that you're trying to solve that and create that solution going forward. And then, like it says here, this is non-negotiable. Make the shift. Remember to get back to your homeostasis, to your neutral. This is so important. Without this, you may get stuck in that heaviness, that uncomfortable energy of the conflict, and it may persist. And so we recommend things like Ho'oponopono. Mayan talked about earlier, please forgive me, I forgive you. We have shortened it. And if you get really good at this, you can say, please forgive me, I forgive you, chop, chop. That's just us really, really, really condensing the Ho'opono forgiveness process down into one simple phrase. But you don't take that lightly. You actually need to really do the work that says, I'm really forgiving you. Please really forgive me. And then chop it and release it.
By chopping, if you remember the Ho'oponopono process, it's you're collecting all of the connection cords, right? The cords between you guys and chopping the cord, essentially creating a clean slate between you two. So that's
Yeah.
what we mean by chop chop, because we're like chop chop, you're chopping the cords, the energetic cords between you and the other person.
Yeah. It's our little reset code where now we're back to good. So other times something like unscripted levity is just the thing to shift the mood. I used to be terrible at that. Now, man, I think you'll probably agree. It's probably one of my super skills. I am able to make you laugh when you don't want to laugh necessarily sometimes. And so that is a huge lift if you can master it. And if your partner isn't so good at it, I ask you to give them some grace because even comedians get on stage and bomb. So not every joke is funny all the time, but they're trying. They're trying to shift their mood, or I invite you to try and shift their mood back to that good to great state as you're choosing to shift out of that former energy and embrace the new energy that you want to move forward in. Remember, that positive state that you're moving back into is really the best state for positive change to move forward. We typically grow better through rewards than through punishment. So if you want that relationship to move in the right direction, get back to the positive, get back to encouraging each other, get back to uplifting each other. Don't stay harsh, don't stay hard, don't stay down on somebody. That's a way to create shame. Shame is a spiral that's always going to lead you back to disappointment and pain.
Another idea for how you can shift is you can ask, like, are we good? Like, so are we good? And then one of the things that Angus and I would say to each other is, hey, tell your face. Right? Like, just jokingly, like, okay, if we're good, then tell your face. So that could be another example. Bringing
Yes.
lefty.
Tell your face. So I want to open it up. The last couple pages are essentially just something that you can like cut out or keep with you, take a screenshot of, something like that. So it's on your phone so that you can keep it ready access, because in the moment, you're not going to remember what the hell, what does the R stand for? What's the I stand? So keep it with you and practice it. Practice it in your conflicts, especially in the little conflicts. Because if you can get good at it in the little conflicts, then when the bigger ones come, you're able to have those conversations much more easily and much more fluidly. And if you have a partner who's open to this kind of thing, have the conversation with them beforehand about like, can we agree to face our conflicts like this? By doing that, by getting that agreement, you're setting yourself up for those softer starts where you're seeking to understand each other before you seek to be understood. And now you can move through them much more easily, coming out on the other side, as I often say, like better connected in a stronger relationship because of the conflict. We don't avoid conflicts in our household. We just push into them, get everything out that we can, squeeze them for all they are, and come out better on the other side. All right. What are your thoughts? What questions do you have? What do I need to know? Let's open up. I'll stay on this call as long as you want, as many questions as you have, but let's dive into this. What are some of the struggles that you might see happening here? Where do you push back and go, ooh, I tried this one time and it didn't work. It backfired. What do I need to know? Or we can all just go have dinner.
I think I need time just to like soak it all in, right? It was really neat. I like having a new acronym to play with and try to attach all the steps to.
Thanks. Yeah.
And curious is a
Cool.
good acronym because right, that's exactly what you want to be, right?
Yeah. And that's to me, if you can embrace the idea of being curious, it is a superpower. It's one of the best states, energetic states to be in. People love being around people who are curious. So if you can remind yourself, whether you're going out to an event or whether you're in a conflict, to stay in that curiosity, you're going to connect to people much more easily and you're going to have a better outcome. So it definitely helped us because that curiosity runs through the entire thing. At each point, there's an opportunity for us to be curious at each of those letters of the acronym. So that's where we came up with that. Thanks for sharing that.
Mhm. I have one thought.
Yeah.
I guess where I struggle, I think the most is shifting out of the energy,
Mm-hmm.
even after like going through a process or repair or whatever.
Yeah.
That's like my biggest struggle.
And I wonder, Mindy, and I wonder if those times where you've found it hard to shift, if maybe one or more of these steps were missed, right? If you didn't actually feel understood by your partner,
Mhm.
or if there wasn't rapport and it went straight to trying to solve it, right? Or they didn't identify their part or vice versa. Like maybe because we didn't hit those, then it was like you're rushing to kind of, resolve it before it was completely resolved. So I'd be curious, practicing all of these steps moving forward to see, okay, yeah, now it's easy for me to shift because I feel complete. I
Yeah,
feel resolved.
it does
great
make
point.
sense because there definitely are moments where it does feel like fully resolved and I can just like shift out of that and move forward. But sometimes, yeah, that's a really good point, actually.
Good point, man. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Good share. Thanks.
Yeah,
Mhm.
All right. Yes. Everybody tell your face. You're good. And don't hide those faces. Get out there. Let the world see it. They need to see your bright, shining, beautiful, radiant faces. The world needs more of that. So hiding behind the Facebook marketplace dating. It's not marketplace, Facebook dating, whatever it is. Get out there. Have some fun. All right, ladies, it's been fun. It's been a blast. I appreciate you. And until we see you next time, man, what's the next call? You
yeah,
guys get me two in a row?
yeah. On the 18th.
18th.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mark your calendars. Oh,
Perfect.
and we are doing a special 5-day challenge starting next Monday. So if you want to join, just let us know and we can get you started. It's called The Audacity to Be Adored, and it's a brand new experience. You probably haven't heard us teach any of it. So yeah, we invite you to join us. And it's really about receiving. How do we be in that energy of being adored? And I don't just mean like, oh, you're sitting there being adored. Like, no, it's like, how can you be in your energy so that you're the biggest, shiniest version of you, right? You don't have to shrink and you get to know and feel what it's like for other people to not just like appreciate you, but lift you up, encourage you, all of those things. So So highly encourage you to join us, and please tell your friends.
Awesome. With that, ladies, it's been a pleasure, and we'll see you on the 18th, if not sooner. Have a great night.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.